Hey everybody, this video is going to be a quick walkthrough of how I set up a ZFS RAIDZ pool using 4 physical disks on Ubuntu 18.04. Quick disclaimer, this is not an in-depth guide on ZFS and a lot of its features that it does have available, such as snapshots and just different things it can do as far as to prevent from data corruption. There's a lot it can do actually, and I'm looking forward to getting more into that once I become familiar with it and kind of get my hands dirty with it. But I feel that's the best way I kind of learn things, is just to jump into it and get my hands dirty with it and just start playing around with it. So that's basically what I'm setting up here. It's just kind of a test server. I had 4 drives available and I kind of needed something. I'm doing a lot of transfers, file transfers between systems, and I just needed something kind of in the middle to kind of put stuff temporarily and then organize it. And this was a perfect opportunity for me to kind of test out the ZFS, because the server I'm using doesn't have any hardware controller for the hard drives, and that's kind of key with ZFS. You don't want a hardware RAID controller that's going to obfuscate the drives. You want to have them available individually and nothing kind of in between. So the server I had, it's an older one, but it offers that. There's no RAID controller that's going to get in the way. So that's kind of key as far as what you want is for hardware. So before you begin, you want to have a couple drives available to you, preferably no controller in the way. If you do have a controller, well, you're going to have to figure that out on your own, and how to get that working. I do know ZFS does complain about if it doesn't have direct access to those drives. So that's something you'll have to, your use case will vary if that's in fact your case. In this little walkthrough, we're going to be setting up RAIDZ. So it's a ZFS software RAID. And what we'll be doing is, just taking our 4 drives and setting that up. There's a couple things we need to do first. And what that is, well, get ZFS utils installed. Now, I'm running Ubuntu 18.04. It's actually Xubuntu. So I got the GUI, the guided user interface, or graphical user interface. It's more appropriate. And we're going to start off. I also like having at least two terminal windows open. Now for this, I got a top and a bottom one. Depending on how your monitor's oriented, you may want to do it differently. As you can see in the background, I got portrait and horizontal landscape, I guess, landscape and portrait monitor orientations. These are better for having things split, and then the landscape is better for having side by side. So, like I said, depending on your layout, do whatever suits you. So we're gonna start off with sudo apt update. I always want to do that really before you install anything, really. So we're gonna update here, yada yada yada. That's gonna go through. And meanwhile, if that's gonna take a minute for you, which it may or may not, depends on what my internet decides to do. This thing was kind of acting up earlier. We need to get our disks. Now we're going to start off with sudo fdisk-l, and then you're going to want to type in the correct password of yours. But once we do that, you know what? Let me maximize this particular terminal. We'll come back to the update in a second. So you can see we got I have, in this instance, 4 750 gig hard drives I have available to use. And then my last one's, as you can see down here, device/SDE. It's actually an SDD drive that I'm using for the operating system. So these other 4 are available to me. So it goes from SDA, SDB, C, all the way down to D. Now, a lot of tutorials, the couple I went to online, indicate that it's best to identify the devices by ID if you can, because if you do it just by, the SD blank, whatever letter it is, it can lead to problems down the road. For instance, if I do it by just the ID now, from my understanding is I'll be able to pull out these hard drives, switch them around, plug them back in, and I think the pool will still, be the same because they'll be identified by ID. I'm actually going to try that later on after this video, or maybe I'll put a little tail end onto this current video I'm recording and let anyone know the status of and how that little experiment turned out, because I'm interested to I know that if I didn't define the devices by ID and I swapped them around, that would more than likely lead to some pretty substantial issues. I don't know. Maybe I'll try it, even though I know it's going to break something. I might try it anyways, but I don't know. So to get our device by ID, we're going to go to our device folder, and we're going to just do an LS. And here you can see, okay, we got, what we're looking for is our disk folder. So we can see that right down here. We're going to CD into that. Do an LS, you can see we got a couple options here. We got by ID, by parse, I'm guessing that's partial label, and then by parse UID. So there's a, unique identifier ID. I found that I don't think these drives have a UID. No, they didn't. Only my SSD. Yeah, did I say SDD earlier? I think I did. If I did, I'm an idiot for one, but all right. Anyway, so the 4 hard drives I'm looking at, I'm going to try this folder or directory by ID. And if you do an LS, just so you know, I have an alias set for L, which basically says this: L equals what is it? LS dash la F, so LAHF. So that's my alias I'm using. So if you see me type in L, I'm just doing, that's kind of what it equals. It's just an alias that I set in bash RC. Okay, back to the meat and bones here. Let me just clear that. Do our L again. All right, so what we got? We got our drives, looks like, and then other little partitions. All right, the important thing we want is up here, so we can see. All right, this ATA ST 37506. All right, that's one of my Seagate 750 gig drives. Cool. So that's what we want. We can see that up here. Basically it's just a soft link, or yeah, it would be a soft link, I think. Yeah. So that's what kind of it points to: SDB, SD, C, A, D, all 4 here. Before we get really into that, I'm going to go back to our thing here. It says, okay, all packages are up to date. If they're not, just do a sudo apt upgrade. This should just say, yeah, it's not going to do that. Once you're all set with that, we're going to do sudo apt install, and then we're going to go, let's see, what is it? ZFS utils dash Linux. And that'll go through, do its thing. I already have it installed, so that's why I completed. Yours might take a minute. So while you're waiting for it to do the sudo apt upgrade and then install the ZFS utils, you can go back over to your device folder or directory, whatever you want to call it, where it has the disk and then by ID, where you have your list of drives listed by ID. What I find is easier too is I'm going to copy these IDs and do a text editor to kind of build my command in there before I go and just try to type it all out in one line through the terminal, because that can be a pain, especially with these long names here. So I'm going to copy them in order too. So we'll start with SDA. We can see right here. I'm going to copy this ID. So copy that. Go to our notepad. Also helps in this case, I'm going to put notepad always on top, and you'll see why that's going to be helpful in a second here. All right, so this is our SDA. Now we also want to put the full path in here, so we're going to do device, disk, and then by-id hyphen. I'm going to do a shift home, control insert to copy that for our 4 drives, because that'll be our kind of prefix. You can see our path is right up here. So then this will be our full path for that disk. So let's go to SDB, which is right here. copy that, paste. Okay, that's correct. And just confirm that you pasted the correct one to, I don't know, sometimes I try copying something, I think I have one thing in the clipboard, and then I end up, it's not there, it's something previous, the copy didn't go through, whether or not I misclicked or whatever. But it's always good to verify, okay, 6VR, 6VR. I usually just verify like the last few characters, because you can see in this case, they're all different. And the last one's SDD. Let's copy that, paste that. All right, so there's the path to our 4 disks. Let me go back. I'm going to open up a browser here. And our notepad, I'm going to do there so it's not on top anymore. These couple sites I have here, I'll put a link in the video as far as kind of the few I went to get some information about ZFS. This one in particular I found kind of helpful. Well, they're all pretty helpful, but this one maybe a little more so. It's over on linode.com, and it talks about the different pools and what you can do, as far as the data sets, snapshots, and rollbacks. So we got our RAIDZ pools, how to destroy them, mirrored, non-redundant, a lot of different options. Quick side note, there's also this page at itsfos.com, and it's called What is ZFS? Nice little introduction. But what I found really helpful was its description of copy on write. I've had a hard time wrapping my head around that concept, but they just did a really good breakdown of kind of what it entails. And I'll just give the tail ending here. It just ensures that if the system crashes or something else happens while a write is taking place, old data is preserved. And the way it does that, it writes the new data on a different area than the old data was written. So that's kind of what copy on write entails. So if your system crashes, you can survive it. Relatively speaking, there's other things to take into consideration. But yeah, all these sites offer some good information. And like I said, I'll post my references in the description of this video. We can see on this one page, okay, this is the wiki.ubuntu.com. And it's for the RAIDZ, it says, like RAID 5, this uses a variable width strip for parity. Allows one to get the most capacity out of a bunch of disks. So that's why I like it. It offers the most capacity while still offering redundancy. With a slight sacrifice in performance, as you'll see and read. But it also gives an example of our command. And you can see here we got sudo zpool create, example in this case being the name of the zpool you'd like to create, and then the type of vdev, which is virtual device, is pretty much, if you read vdevs, that's what they're referring to, a virtual device. So this is the type. So in this case we're doing RAIDZ. You can see in the next example that uses RAIDZ2, you would put RAIDZ2 for the type. And then that's followed by our devices we want to include in our pool. So in this case, it's got the 4. It's got, let's see what's it got here. SDB, SDC, SDD, SDE. So they obviously probably are using SDA as their root partition for their operating system, which is fine. Every system's different. Your use case may vary. It just so happened that the SSD drive I had plugged into the system was, I guess, recognized after the 4 main disks I wanted to use. Okay, so using this as an example, we're going to kind of create our command. So I'm going to copy just the beginning part of this, knowing that the second half is going to be the list of drives we want to include. So let's go ahead and copy that and paste that in. Yeah, if you want to copy, it's wiki.ubuntu.com/kernel/reference/ZFS. That's kind of where I'm getting these commands from, these examples. So let's make this our own here. So my example, I'm going to create a ZFS. It's going to equate to about 2 terabyte, and I'm just going to do a RAIDZ. So that's just my label for my pool. I'm going to do a RAIDZ, and then after this is followed by our devices. So what I'm going to do is just get rid of the new line characters and put a space in between each one. Now this is going to get long here. Or you could do, what is it, a forward or backslash? I forget. I probably should learn that. How to spread commands across multiple lines. Anywho, let's go to the end of this line here. What I like doing when I'm making these commands, or putting something like this together where it's kind of long, and it's basically, it prevents some syntax errors when you're just kind of typing into the command line or copying and pasting directly into the command line. More often than not, it's led to issues for me in the past. So this is why I these longer commands like this, I kind of build them in a notepad or text editor. I always let me restart. I always pad the ending with a couple spaces, and then I do a carriage return or new line, hit the enter key. And the reason for that is I've gone to copy a line before and paste it in the terminal, and I end up copying, well, the carriage return in a sense. So when I paste the command, it automatically executes the command. Sometimes I don't want to do that. Sometimes I just kind of want to eyeball it, make sure everything's kosher and hunky-dory. So to kind of avoid that, I always pad it kind of with some spaces. That way I can put the cursor at the end of the line. I know it's there. See, if you have a couple spaces at the end, you can see where your cursor is at. So you can just put the cursor at the very end without having to worry about a new line. Now you could do this without the spaces. I just found it easier to see the cursor instead of having it go right down to the next line, especially with a longer command like this. It's hard to see because you got scrolling involved. But by adding the spaces, you can see, okay, this in fact is the end of the line. I'm going to do a shift home to copy everything from that position on all the way to the beginning. And then we're going to just copy that. So that's in our clipboard. We'll go back to our terminal. So after your software's done installing, we're gonna cd into our root folder. I'm gonna do an ls or an L with my alias there, and you can see that this is our typical Unix Linux directory structure. When you create a ZFS pool, they'll be created in the root folder. So after we issue this command, you'll see another directory there. So let's paste our newly crafted command. So we've got our sudo zpool. I'm going to create. Here's the name of the zpool. Here's the type. And then here's our devices by ID. All right. That looks good, so fingers crossed. Yes, we do have a file system on there, don't we? Something I guess I should have looked at. We might have to cut here. You know what? I'm just going to open. All right, so going back to step one, you want to make sure you have blank drives. I already had a zpool on here. I thought by destroying it would have just got rid of these partitions. Apparently it doesn't. It's something I'm going to have to look into as far as why that's the case. So I'm going to apply this. So sure you want to apply the pending operations? Yes. Yeah, if you don't have, I'm using gparted. If you don't have that installed, you can just do a sudo apt install gparted, and you should be good if you need it. In case you do have drives that do have partitions on them. Okay, so now we can see my 4 drives do in fact, they're unallocated. I'm just gonna do a quick disk. Okay, all right, this makes a little more sense now. All right, so fingers crossed. We're going to do, all our command again here. So I just did the command, and zpool doesn't give you any feedback, so if nothing comes back, chances are you got lucky. So I'm gonna do an ls again. Look at this. May have gotten lucky. So let's cd into that. Okay, no files, no nothing. Let's see how much disk free space we have, and I'm going to do human readable. Alright, so if you do that, the df space hyphen h, that'll give you a readable output of the disk space free. That's kind of what the df stands for. It'll give you an indication of how much free hard drive space you have or whatnot, even with the mounts. So just free space available in general. So we can see on our ZFS 2TB RAIDZ, we have in fact 2.0 T for terabytes, 0% used. Cool beans. There's also the, what is it, the Z, I'm going to have to look at my notes here. Zpool status, I think it is. Let's pull up our little helpful guide here on the interwebs. Okay, yeah, so it's sudo zpool status, and then you can even do the pool status. But I guess it doesn't matter if you do sudo or not. Oops, I did that command wrong, didn't I? Yeah, you got to do the status first. Well, so those pretty much, yeah, display the same information. I guess if you had multiple pools, these two commands would then indeed show different information. So yeah, we got our disks, everything's online. So yeah, looks like we can start writing data to it. So I'm just going to do like an echo here, test data. And we're going to output that to test data file.txt. Ooh, what's the permissions? I didn't even check the permissions. Oh, so root does control that. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change that. I don't know if it matters. This is probably not a good idea, what I'm doing right here. This is a test system for me, so I don't really care, but you're going to want to watch what permissions you put on your zpool. There's better ways to go about doing that. Alright, so I got a test file at least written into that folder, because what I'm going to do is, after this video, I'm going to shut down the server, pull out the drives, do my swaparoo, plug them back in, and see what the state of the file system is in, the ZFS file system, and yeah, if it handles it, I mean, that'll be cool, you know, a little more resilient, especially if you define them by ID, and that's what it recommends in a lot of the tutorials, except they usually don't do that in their examples. They'll have this little, you know, asterisk in the beginning of the tutorial saying, hey, you should really, you know, when you're defining your devices for your ZFS pool, define them by an ID, and then they go on and don't do that, which I understand. You know, there's less, you know, every ID is going to be different per system, so they don't want to maybe have an extra layer of ambiguity as far as the IDs go for new users. But I just wanted to show an example of how that kind of works by ID and how I got it set up. And from here, I'm just going to kind of use it, play around with it, check out the different features, and I suggest you do the same because for me anyways, and I know everyone's different, everyone's learning style is unique to them. But for me, and I think a lot of other people, it's tend to learn better by example and just being shown something and hey, here's where you start and just go from here. Here's what you can do with it. Here's some examples and play around with it. And that's a really good way to learn, hands-on. And then it helps associate it then. There's a lot of commands with anything in computers. And it's hard to remember them individually if you don't have a use for them. So you have to have that correlation. Okay, this command does that, and this is the case where I may need to use it. And once you do an example of, okay, I can see how I can utilize that, you're more likely to remember it, and it's more likely to just kind of stick in your brain a little bit. Anyways, for me anyways, and like I said, I think there's other people out there that the same happens. So that's about it for this one. Sorry about the pauses and the ums and whatnot. I'm not really familiar. Let me start over. I'm not really comfortable and familiar yet with these videos and recordings or whatnot. But I just wanted to start getting some content out there because there's a lot of stuff I've been learning, not with just Linux, but just the whole DevOps thing. And I've been working on computers for a long ass time, and but you wouldn't know it by anything I have available online because there is nothing available online. So I wanted to kind of start changing that. So yeah, if you found this semi-useful to you, yeah, give it a thumbs up or whatever. Until next time, see ya.